conversation with retired Admiral James Stavridis. The U.S. ambassador to China says the United States is now ready to hold high-level talks with Beijing. Speaking at an event yesterday, Ambassador Nicholas Burns said the U.S. wants to develop, quote, better channels between the two governments. NBC News reports he also said, while the relationship is complicated, the United States does not seek conflict with China, and that dialogue would be more constructive. Can't argue with that, Admiral. It would be more constructive, but why do you suspect this message is being sent right now at this moment from the United States?
Yeah, I think, first of all, Nick Burns, somebody I've known a long time, he was our ambassador to NATO, so he understands how complicated this international scene is. The reason we, the United States, are making these overtures right now, Willie, is pretty simple. It's because the relations have really cratered over the last 6 months, everything from spy balloons to worsening trade to cyber conflict to arguments about the South China Sea. So none of that is good for the global environment. And here we also get to Ukraine. We want Russia not to get support from China. The best way to do that is to have good relations, reasonably good, between China and the United States. There's a big game of risk afoot here.
Admiral, it's so interesting. I was at a Global Citizen event last week and interviewed President Macron, and here we're talking about the things that he thinks need to be done to help on the issue of climate change. And top of his list is the United States and China getting together and starting to talk again. He said it's one of the reasons he went there on the trip that was seen as controversial. He said, we've got to break the ice. And it is true, is it not? If we're worried about global security, if we're worried about Ukraine not escalating into World War III, if we're worried about climate change, if we're worried about the economy, if we're worried about trade, if we're worried, again, let's underline it again, global security, the United States has to talk to China, regardless of what Trump Republicans are saying and regardless of what some people on the far left are saying. We have to talk to them.
Indeed, we do. And here's how I would categorize it, Joe. What we need to do is confront China where we must, where they're flying spy balloons over the United States, where they claim the entire South China Sea, a body of water half the size of the United States, as territorial waters. It's a preposterous claim. We need to confront China where we must, but we should cooperate wherever we can. And you just ticked off the shopping list. It's the environment. It's cooperation and global security, trying to resolve the situation in Ukraine. I'll add one to your list, prepare for the next pandemic. Part of why our global response was so disastrous is because it disaggregated the United States from China and others who were involved in it. So we should have a strategy that says confront where we must, cooperate wherever we can. That's the best policy. That's why Nicholas Burns is putting those feelers out. The next thing you'll see, and watch for it, will be cabinet level officials going to Beijing. Look for Janet Yellen to go, our Secretary of the Treasury. Look for Ginny Raimondo, former governor of Rhode Island and currently the Secretary of Commerce. That's the cooperate where we can side. We'll continue to confront where we must.
Let's put this relationship in perspective. I hear for people who loathe Joe Biden, who are overly ideological, and it's all partisanship. They'll talk about how weak we are and how China's pushing us around and how this, and it skews the debate. It goes against the reality of everything I've heard from leaders in Europe, leaders in the Middle East, leaders in Asia. They're all saying the United States is flexing their muscles more than ever before. And I'm not being jingoistic here. I'm saying American leaders, especially in Washington, need to look, and this is what Dr. Brzezinski always said, look at America through the eyes of our adversaries, through the eyes of our allies. And I can tell you right now, our allies and our adversaries are saying, we're not leading from behind anymore.
Welcome to another episode of Straight Outta Politics. I'm your host for today. I go by Jay or CJ, and CJ stands for Compton J, which is my Twitter or social media handles. So, totally prepared for the thumbnail topic, the so-called assassination attempt of Putin by Ukraine. That's the main story, and we got Wyatt up here in a few minutes for that. But as I was waiting, I always check out Morning Joe to see what's the latest propaganda, and stumbled upon this here. This segment that is pure cope. Because some of the other segments that Nick and I have covered, you should hear how they're talking about China, trying to be tough on China. This very guest that he has here. Now, it's a completely different sort of perspective that he has, but it's complete cope. But let's listen to a little more, because now Morning Joe, or I should say Joe Scarborough, is going to talk a little more. And it's amazing to me to hear some of his past segments and some of the things he says here. So let's listen a little more to this conversation.
Like our pivot to Asia has started, and we've actually boxed China in. You look at what we've done in Guam, the increased force there. You look at the increased force in the Philippines, the agreement there. You look at the nuclear sub-agreement with Australia. You look.
So Joe Scarborough is making an attempt. So this is what I think. I mean, the United States is obviously seeing what's happening around the world. You're talking about pieces breaking out in places that people would never have thought. You have them trying to negotiate, or at least speaking to one side of the, I think, speaking to Putin. We have Xi speaking to Putin about a peace deal and a peace plan. You have these countries now dealing in their own locale currency. You got the BRICS banks, and you got all of this happening. And the United States is in panic mode. And, there's a side of the ruling class that's saying, hey, we need to work with China even still to keep making money, because that's a market. But anyway, let's listen to some more of what he says here, Morning Joe.
Look at the agreement with Japan to start flexing their muscle.
Actually, I do want to rewind it just a little bit here. Let's rewind it 30 seconds.
Look at America through the eyes of our adversaries, through the eyes of our allies. And I can tell you right now, our allies and our adversaries are saying, we're not leading from behind anymore. Like our pivot to Asia has started, and we've actually boxed China in. You look at what we've done in Guam, the increased force there. You look at the increased force in the Philippines, the agreement there. You look at the nuclear sub-agreement with Australia. You look at the agreement with Japan to start flexing their muscles and building their military out. China, and I'm not being critical of the Biden administration, America's doing what America's been promising they're going to do for 20 years and never did it. We have pivoted to China. And
we're choosing to pivot to China
in Asia now than we've had. At the same time, and forgive me for this long buildup, but our policymakers that watch this show need to understand it. At the same time, China has a reason for feeling, a little tight around the collar. They have a reason for saying, my God, the Americans are starting to surround us. At least we can understand starting
to surround us. And now he's saying maybe we should start. I guess the cope is maybe we should start listening to some of what they are saying about how they feel about our aggression. And Joe Scarborough is saying, maybe we need to start. So let's back away from this, and let's bring up this graphic here. So the United States surround China with military bases. So this is a graphic illustrating military bases near China, U.S. military bases near China. Now, these bases didn't get built over the last few months. Okay? Like Joe Scarborough is trying to pretend. They didn't get built in the last couple of years even. I'm sure there's been some add additions here and there, but I'm saying for the most part, these bases have been around. So I guess this is the ruling class now saying we need to start publicly acknowledging what we've already been told and known for several decades, that we are bullies. So now he's saying we need to start accepting that because they see hegemony slipping away. So I guess maybe the aim is just to make sure they stay one of the leading countries, at least. I don't know how they would do that without joining BRICS. How would that happen? Could you imagine the United States joining BRICS? All right, so let's go back to, and there's another version. I have another version of this map. Let me see if it's any better. Not that this is bad, but you can see a couple of, it's just a little wider. So you can see a little more on the left here. But the United States says China is the one threatening them with spy balloons, while we have all these bases surrounding them. It's a joke. But anyway, let's get back to the Morning Joe clip. And where is it here? Right here. I got a bunch of because when Wyatt gets here, when we begin this discussion on this, there's a lot of like receipts to sort of go through, and thankfully Max Blumenthal and his people over at the Grayzone, there's a thread I can kind of go through. There's some articles. So luckily they've kind of pieced this together really quickly but it's kind of been a developing story. But anyway, we'll get to that. Let's stay on this story here. So let's get back to the video where Joe Scarborough is saying maybe we need to start looking at things from the position of our adversary or our opponent or the other person, the other country, and start looking at maybe they're starting to feel a little hot around the collar, playing down the aggressive nature of U.S. militarism. But let's go back to the Morning Joe clip, or segment, I should say, because it's longer than the clip. And let's listen to more of this cope. Particularly, I'm just very gleeful to hear this from Morning Joe, this cope.
Like, our pivot to Asia is started, and we've actually boxed China in. You look at what we've done in Guam, the increased force there. You look at the increased force in the Philippines, the agreement there. You look at the nuclear sub-agreement with Australia. You look at the agreement with Japan to start flexing their muscles and building their military out. China, and I'm not being critical of the Biden administration, America's doing what America's been promising they're going to do for 20 years and never did it. We have pivoted to China, and we have a stronger presence in Asia now than we've had. At the same time, and forgive me for this long buildup, but our policymakers that watch this show need to understand it. At the same time, China has a reason for feeling
as I showed you
around the
some
collar.
of the
They have a
graphics
reason for saying, my God, the Americans are starting to surround us. And if at least we can understand why they're thinking that way, that helps us get to the table and start talking about some of our disagreements instead of this just reflexive anti-China movement on the Hill.
Indeed. And I'll add one to your list of how it looks from Beijing, which
This
you didn't
guy is
mention, which is recently announced
This guy is
U.S.
such a
nuclear submarines
mainstay
will be doing
for U.S. Propaganda. This particular guy right here.
port calls in Korea. And oh, by the way, we have ships in and out of Singapore constantly. So yes, we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the other and therefore understand their arguments.
Amazing.
For example, why they think they own the South China Sea.
So I don't know if this is at all connected, like this cope, this worry is at all connected. Let me see if it'll let me.
Not that we're.
Oops. Oh, you couldn't see the pop-up. Well, let me see if it'll let me. Okay. Did it go away there? I was trying to read the caption. Okay, United States ambassador to China says U.S. is ready to hold high-level talks with Beijing. Now, maybe this is cult because Beijing is not returning or taking their calls. I think Nick has done a couple of segments on this where supposedly it's been reported that a lot of the high-level people in the People's Republic of China, or the in China, what was I just saying? Sorry, hold on a second here. Okay, yeah. U.S. ambassador, the high-level talks. What I was getting to is if you remember, there was several stories where it was saying that high-level people in the China government was not taking the calls from people, even Joe Biden, and were not taking calls from anyone in the U.S. And then you see all of these things sort of happening, the things that the China is developing, peace talks, and all of the Belt Road Initiative. They're going to talk about that in just a second. So it's a fear, more of like, it feels like more they want to get in contact with China because they're afraid of what's going on. It's kind of like, let me make sure I'm communicating with my enemy to kind of get a feel of what they're trying to do. And that's kind of what I think is going on. But this is complete state media. I see you, Wyatt. I'll give you a couple of minutes there to get ready. And this is completely state media. I see the comment in the chat there.
We're going to agree with it, but because then we can reverse engineer those arguments, negotiate, and resolve some of these conflicts. All of that is crucial to diplomacy. Final thought, Joe, I hear a lot, you probably do too, that, oh my God, we're in a new Cold War with China. No, we're not. And, you know, Mike Barnacle and I are old enough to actually remember the Cold War. That was the Soviet Union, the United States, and NATO.
All right, so let's actually bring in our guest for the end of this segment, because he may have something to say about some of this this China stuff, just broadly speaking. So this is a well-known guest that we've had on the network pretty often, international journalist, anti-imperialist journalist in particular. This is Wyatt Reed. Welcome, Wyatt, back to the network. What's up, bro?
Good. Thanks for having me on. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on with y'all.
Absolutely. So I know you just got here, but I was researching the segment about what I asked you to come on here for, which is the story about the so-called assassination attempt on Putin. But then I came across this other segment on Morning Joe where it's pure cope about U.S. hegemony in China. It's basically where they're there to say, hey, we need to talk. We want high-level talks. We got to talk to China. You know, they're now trying to make it seem like the United States is voluntarily pivoting to China. That's kind of like what they're calling this rise in China. We're pivoting to China together. And I'll bring back up the clip to kind of play a little more of it. But just broadly speaking, what is especially since you are kind of like an international journalist, so I know you're abreast of a lot of different stories. So broadly speaking, what is your take on just U.S. hegemony and sort of what China is doing, brokering sort of peace deals, the Belt and Road Initiative? Just kind of broadly speaking, what do you think is going on, and what is your opinion on all of that?
Yeah, it seems like they're kind of trying to manage the narrative a little bit, right? The brief bit that I heard was kind of a pretty fascinating admission. He says, you hear a lot about the new Cold War with China. Do you? Like, I don't know where he's hearing that from. I hear it. You hear it, because we are in this very anti-imperialist sphere. But the fact that somebody like that actually is apparently hearing, presumably behind closed doors, about, this new Cold War with China, that to me indicates that this narrative that I thought was just something that a handful of, us weirdos on the internet were talking about,
radicals,
apparently they're actually, having this discussion themselves, which on the one hand, it's, you generally want your enemy to be let's say, have less information than they need. And I do think, like, I consider the U.S. regime my enemy, and I think it considers me the same. And I would imagine you feel pretty similar.
Yes.
But
I was waiting
but
for our tag of like Russian state media or China, and then they took it up. But yeah, we were always expecting that to happen to us. But continue, Wyatt. Go ahead.
yeah, well, so that is the one aspect you honestly kind of wish, like, I hope these guys don't really understand what's really happening in the rest of the world, because that way they'll be less able to interfere with it and less able to prevent those processes from happening. But I guess it is kind of at least reassuring on some level to understand, like, okay, they at least acknowledge that this is something that's being said, that they're acknowledging this reality, even if it's only to try to debunk it, but they're at least like voicing these thoughts out loud. I think that's probably a beneficial thing. The more people hear this idea and are cognizant of this concept of, like, okay, one thing is to have a competition, another thing is like great power rivalry. That is like real Cold War stuff. So I don't know. Obviously, the context here is that we've had a number of massive breakthroughs in terms of international relations over the past couple months. We've had Iran and Saudi Arabia, this kind of rapprochement where they hadn't had relations at all for the past 7 years. Historically, going back decades, they have been very much rivals. Now they're sitting down, they're opening back up embassies. And then you see, the Saudis are meeting with the Houthis in Yemen, right? So all
that's
of this
really what surprised me. That's one of the ones that really surprised me. But continue, sir.
Well, to me, it shows that the Saudis are a little bit smarter or more clever than you might give them credit for, because, look, they're not stupid, right? They may be extremely self-interested, but they're certainly not dumb. They're looking around at the writing on the wall. They're seeing the rest of the world. They're seeing Brazil, all these countries that were very recently firmly within the orbit of the United States are now de-dollarizing, and they're switching their currencies. They're strengthening their own currencies, and they're simultaneously weakening the U.S. dollar's control over the global economy. So, the Saudis are looking at this and saying, hey, maybe it's time for us to play a more productive role. Instead of basically being like the attack dog for the American empire, we should prioritize our own strategic goals and prerogatives instead of basically, acting as kind of a stand-in for U.S. interests in the same way that Israel has done so for so long. So, I mean, that to me is a meaningful shift, because it shows kind of a shift in the the self-perception, right? In terms of what Saudi Arabia wants as a country. Well, now they want to be a regional power, and they realize that in order to be a regional power in their own right, they're going to need to have their own relations with everyone else in the region. They can't just stand behind the U.S.
The one bully.
Right, exactly. And then just, spit on the victim on the ground, step in afterwards. Hey,
and to your point, this is another development here. This is President, I think it's pronounced Rossi, President Rossi arriving in Syria to this just grand sort of celebration of him arriving. It's amazing what's happening to your point. But did you also hear about this news here? I think it was reported on Cradle. Is this video? Let me see where it's from. Hang on a second here. Yeah, sure. The Cradle, breaking news. President Rossi arrives in Syria, in Syria's Damascus. Damascus. Just amazing. Another thing that to me, I wouldn't say would not be possible. It just didn't feel like this was like next week. You know what I mean? It didn't feel like it was this close. But can you speak to that point, to the, like, what does it mean that it's happened so quickly since all of these peace deals, just one after another, like literally weeks apart?
It kind of calls to mind this famous Lenin quote where he said that there are decades where nothing happens, and there was weeks where decades happen. And
Mm-hmm.
this past couple months has been full of weeks like that, where you just one thing after another, after another, after another. And so this piece right here, I mean, this is kind of the this reincorporation of Syria back into the diplomatic fold. Something that seemed, as you correctly pointed out, it seemed really far off for many years. And even just having the Iranian foreign minister, who's obviously a very close ally of the Syrian government, they wouldn't necessarily be making trips in person to Damascus, even being
Right.
close allies.
Right. You would
But
send like high level or maybe mid level people in your government to go represent you. So this is really big. To your point, go ahead.
well, to me, the most important thing is that Syria is kind of on the cusp of being readmitted to the Arab League. That so Iran is one thing, but when the countries that have been propping up, have been pushing this proxy war in your country for years, are finally willing to do the same. When Qatar and Saudi Arabia Turkey is kind of the main holdout, right? Turkey is playing its own separate game there, but the rest of the Arab countries, right? All pretty much of the Arab countries are back at this point where they're now trying to bring Syria back into the fold. And that's, that to me, that shows you how far we've come in the span of a very short time. Because, this would have been unimaginable very recently. But now we're going to have a chance, I think, for Syria to get back on the right foot. And more importantly, for Syria's economy to get back on the right foot, and for Syrian people to be able to start living their lives in a more normal way.
That's the part that we all like here that are anti-imperialists. That's that last part. That's the part we're really fighting for, is for regular people to not be involved. In these sort of
pawns.
These being played as pawns in these games for these ruling classes of all of these countries. So, but let's listen to a little more so we can close this segment out on China and the cope. I'm going to rewind it back to the beginning of where you said how it was very shocking. I forget the name of this guy right here, but what he says here. And let's just listen to the last 2 minutes. If you would like,
no. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if you want to stop it anywhere, if you hear something, hey, you want to comment on, just I can't see you because I'm looking at the screen, so just let me know. Hey, just stop, and I'll stop. Don't worry about interrupting me.
All right, got it.
All right, so here we go, guys.
Reflexive anti-China movement on the Hill.
Indeed. And I'll add one to your list of how it looks from Beijing, which you didn't mention, which is recently announced U.S. nuclear submarines will be doing port calls in Korea. And oh, by the way, we have ships in and out of Singapore constantly. So yes, we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the other and therefore understand their arguments. For example, why they...
This is so amazing to me. There's a couple of reasons to me why this is amazing. It's because this is a former NATO commander. Now I remember who this is. James
Stavridis, yeah.
It's Stavridis, yeah. And it's amazing that he's coming on TV as a former NATO leader or commander and saying we need to look at it from the position, and they're admitting they're feeling like the little tight around the collar, maybe too many bases, maybe this and that is not good what we're doing. He's kind of pointing out some aggressive things that the United States is doing that maybe we should look at it from their perspective. On many levels, that's very shocking because he's a former NATO leader, and he's saying it publicly, and he's on this particular show, Morning Joe, which is really a show that a lot of elites watch for news. So that's why this to me is so shocking. But can you speak to the point of him being a former NATO commander, and I don't know, is this shocking to you? Is maybe I'm like being overly exaggerating here, maybe I bring it down, but this is very shocking to me for it to be coming from this particular person. Wyatt?
Yeah Stavridis is really he's a warmonger's warmonger. He's the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander for Europe, and he's currently the vice chair of global affairs and the managing director at the Carlyle Group, which is how do I explain who the Carlyle Group is? It's kind of like a cabal of evil geniuses that are secretly manipulating
That's what I was
global
just about
events
to paint
in
the
order
picture
to
of somebody going like this. You know what I mean? Like it's just that.
They're like it's like movie villain evil.
Yeah.
But I think really what he's kind of pointing to is less so that, you know, we need to be more empathetic and we need to try to put ourselves in, you know, China's shoes or whatever, which is just, you know, any time these guys have to like admit something that should be kind of obvious, they give you like this little lesson in empathy 101, like, well, you have to consider, if you want to be a strategic genius like me, you have to consider what it's like, what that person might be thinking. It's like, no, this is extremely basic, you know, sort of analysis is like, what is that person thinking and why? This is just like geopolitical analysis 101. He's presenting it as though it's some kind of cool new trick he's come up with.
Right.
But
well, maybe we
really
should start considering their feelings, like you're being a better person. I'm being a better person now, you know,
right.
your country.
It's like, yeah, no shit. Yes, you should. You should be doing that. But you know, to me, this kind of, it speaks more to this emerging consensus that I think you see on both sides of this divide between kind of the Democrats that want the Cold War with Russia and the Republicans that want the Cold War with China. You know, I think Stavridis has come down more on the Democrat side. And this is a kind of a critique that I've heard from Republicans like Matt Gaetz, and like, you know, I've heard this on Tucker Carlson's show many times, where
so he's like soft, like he's considered to be soft on China. Is that what the critique is?
right. No, that their problem with the other team's desired Cold War with X, Y, or Z country is that it's going to leave us underprepared for my desired Cold War with the other country, right?
Gotcha.
That's kind of, so that was what the Republicans are saying. Oh, our real enemy, it's not Russia, it's China. We got to stop with the proxy war against Russia so we can focus on Taiwan. You know, he seems to be making the same argument sort of from the other side, or not making it, but he's gesturing towards it in a way that I really haven't seen from very many people on kind of the more Democratic side. So that's kind of an interesting development. Like, I haven't seen so many Democrats push back on this. I heard Fareed Zakaria do this a couple weeks ago, where he kind of pointed out, like, why are we going after China? We're undermining the U.S.-led sort of global economic order by doing all this. And, you know, I think there is a small segment of the ruling class that is making these arguments in public now, just because it's getting to the point where to do otherwise would be so far detached from reality that you couldn't be taken seriously.
So we have to understand that when we say the ruling class, we bunch them all together. You know what I'm saying? But there are different groups of ruling class. They have disagreement on things,
right?
And in particular, military sort of action is where, since that's a large chunk of where the money is spent and used, that's one where a lot of a disagreement could flare up through media, where you think it's just, oh, they just had this is the ruling class mouthpiece just speaking their side. So to your point,
well, they've been united in standing behind global American military and economic domination over the world for many, many years. But now I think it's we're hitting a point where not only is it obvious that the United States is no longer going to control the entire rest of the world, it's to the point where people need to strategize around it. And so you do actually have fractures that in the past were largely sort of superficial, that I think now, because they really do reflect people's bottom lines and their own self-interest, you know, you're going to, I think, see the knives start to come out a little bit more. Whereas, you know, in the past, it was kind of like, oh, we'll pretend to hate each other in public. We all still go to the same, you know, parties and whatever. We send our kids to the same schools. but
Same
we're gonna
island.
put on
They
this
go
little
to the
show.
same island all the time.
Right. And I think now you're starting to get to a point where these fractures could actually turn into something bigger and significant and worth acknowledging and potentially even strategizing around.
Absolutely. Let's listen to a little more of this Cope here. I'm loving it coming from this guy, so I got to hear a little more, and then we'll get to the big news, or the slightly bigger news, which is it's funny we're talking about China in this segment, and then we're going to be moving to Russia, the other big country they're trying to poke the bear on. So let's listen.
The panda too. Yep.
They
Cook the
think
panda,
they
that's a
own
better
the
way.
South China Sea. Not that we're going to agree with it, but because then we can reverse engineer those arguments, negotiate, and resolve some of these conflicts. All of that is crucial to diplomacy. Final thought, Joe, I hear a lot, you probably do too, that, oh my God, we're in a new Cold War with China. No, we're not. And, you know, Mike Barnacle and I are old enough to actually remember the Cold War. That was the Soviet Union, the United States, and NATO, millions of troops nose to nose on the Fulda Gap in Europe, huge battle fleets around the world playing Hunt for Red October, thousands of nuclear weapons on a hair trigger alert. We're not remotely there. We are still engaged. We need to continue that.
We are still engaged. And Mike, you talk to any diplomat, you talk to any business person that has been to China over the past several months, and the Chinese will actually express concern. And the Chinese will actually ask, why does everybody in America hate us? And, you know, you bring up the spy balloon and they'll laugh. They'll go, oh, my God, your spy technology is light years ahead of ours. We have no idea how much you're raking out of China every day. And so
that's pure cope right there. I was
wow.
Right there. Oh, that was pure cope right there. Just ridiculous. Like they're saying you're so much better than us. Why do you hate us? That's basically what he's trying to say there.
Well, but it's like I imagine that's kind of true. Like if I was a Chinese diplomat, I would probably ask them that too. Like, so why do so many people in your country hate us? Why do you say all this crazy stuff about us on the news all the time? You know? But
it is a fair question. Yes, it is a fair question. I do think they asked the question, but the way he's framing it here is to make it seem like and a different something more to the meaning. But absolutely, that would be something you're asking. Like, what did we do?
It's kind of like not doing anything. Like listening to an arsonist outside of a burning building. Like, how did this catch on fire? You know what I mean? Like that's what it's like listening to these people go, oh, why did the Chinese think we hate them? Yeah, right.
Where did this come from? So all right, so I think we can close it there unless you have any more final words on that topic. I think we can probably close it there. Now let's get to the main story, and main story is, as the thumbnail shows, a supposed assassination attempt on Zelenskyy. At least that's how the Kremlin is describing it. I'm sorry. Yeah, I did say Zelenskyy on Putin. My bad. Thank you for the correction. And the thing is, if nobody was here, I would have just went along, and so that's good. Yeah, I wouldn't even noticed it. You know what I mean? I would have just went along. So there we go. So great to have you here, Wyatt. But I'm gonna go to my bookmarks. I have so many receipts. Like I don't know where to start, but I will start with just sort of like the visual we have of the supposed drone takedown, and this is the footage that everybody is seeing being looped over and over. Is very short, but let's play it. I don't think it's any sound. We can play it as we talk. Let me see. Actually, it might be a look at explosion sound. Oh no, there isn't. So this is what everybody's talking about, and I'll read the caption here in just a second.
Yeah.
This is from Carl Za. Drone attack on Kremlin, which Russia said was assassination attempt on Putin. We're entertaining no holds barred stage of war. this will not end well for Ukraine or the West. That's Carl Zahn, friend of the show, also friend of the network. Your initial thoughts on the story in general, just the overall story, and just to be specific, you're not here in a sort of a reporting capacity on this story. You're just here giving your opinions, because it's it's still a lot that needs to develop and it needs to come out before we can really develop opinions. But what is sort of your reaction to the story, the overall story?
Well, it's pretty alarming. This video seems to show a drone being shot down. That first noise you hear at the beginning sounds very, very much like an air defense system, an anti-air munition being launched, that kind of rubber band sound. I became very familiar with that noise when I was in Donetsk the end of last year. So that's what that seems to me. It seems to be getting shot down directly over the dome there.
What did you
officially
think when you first heard that? Because you said you are hearing this sound in person. Describe to me the first time. Did you go, wait, what is that? And somebody told you, or you were just like, what the hell?
When I first heard that noise,
yeah.
Well, I didn't even distinguish it at first. I heard boom, 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 and then after a couple days, I started to learn to like, oh, that boom sounded a little bit higher pitched or shorter or whatever, and then I would ask people, and then, I learned to identify them at some point there.
It's weird how they know what it is. The locals know, like, hey,
totally. Everyone in Donetsk.
That's it. Yeah.
And it's little kids, right? Kids. Wow. There are kids who have never been alive and witnessed anything other than just like that.
Right. This is
that
it. This
kind
is
of
the normal
atmosphere.
Right.
Normal. Exactly. So I mean, my first impression is kind of like, obviously it's a video. I don't think like I'm like getting bombed or whatever. But my first impression seeing this is like, wow, I've been kind of predicting for a couple months that this is the direction that the Ukrainians would go. That as they falter on the battlefield and as they get kind of crushed up by the Russian war machine, that they would basically have no choice in their mind but to try to go towards asymmetrical military strategies, towards a kind of terror tactics, towards sort of insurgent tactics. And that's, I think, what we are seeing more and more, not just this particular assassination attempt, which I do, I think it's probably likely, from what I've read, Putin was not there. And to me, it's not that likely that the Ukrainians would have, I imagine the Ukrainians would have known that, but I can't be sure. Obviously, this is speculation. To me, it was kind of a shot across the bow. They're trying to send a message, hey, we can strike anywhere, anytime. Even if they didn't really strike, they made it close enough to the very heart of Russia to send a message. And the message seems to have been received loud and clear. In Russia, you see quite a bit of anger from some of the more hardcore sort of pro-Russia voices. Sort of how could this have happened? We need to obviously take more significant measures to ensure kind of national defense. But on the other hand, I mean, you have the reaction from former President Dmitry Medvedev, who said, after today's terrorist act, there are no options left but the physical removal of Zelenskyy and his clique. So this is, kind of an escalation, I think, in rhetoric. A lot of people calling for an increase in kind of heavy-handed tactics to respond to this attack. The Kremlin itself said, we consider this a premeditated terrorist action and an attempt against the Russian president. They said they reserve the right to retaliate in a manner, place, and time they're choosing. So, I mean, at least rhetorically, you have a big big bump in terms of the anger and outrage coming from the Russian side. Now, what this results in terms of the battlefield, we don't know yet. But if I was a betting man, I would say there's going to be a significant reaction, a significant response. We didn't see necessarily that much after the recent the pro-Russian journalist was killed in that cafe bombing, but we did see. I think we've seen escalations after the assassination of Dario Dugina and after the destruction of the Kerch Bridge in Crimea. We saw significant escalations from the Russians after the attack on the Crimean Bridge. The Russians started going after energy infrastructure. They started kind of targeting the glue that would sort of hold Ukrainian society together. They started adopting the techniques that, for example, the United States began with on day 2, I believe, in Operation Iraqi Freedom. So these kinds of shock and awe techniques that the Russians have largely refrained from using throughout the course of this conflict, I would say those may be a little bit more on the table right now, but obviously, too soon to say for sure.
Yeah, and we're just gonna get a couple of reactions here from some of the people in government. Here is Antony Blinken speaking on it. It's a very short clip, and there's another clip, the same place. Anthony wasn't on stage, but I believe this person on the left was, and it was like a protest. Medea from
Benjamin
protest. Yeah, Medea Benjamin. That's right. Protested the same conference, I believe.
Bless her.
So maybe we'll get to be able to show that in a little bit. But here is Antony Blinken, his reaction, I guess his first reaction. I don't know if he put out another statement subsequent since the last 2 hours, but this is what he said at this event.
Seen the reports. I can't in any way validate them. We simply don't know. Second, I would take anything coming out of the Kremlin with a very large shaker of salt. So let's see.
He says he would take anything that's coming out of the Kremlin with a very large shaker of salt. Wyatt, go ahead.
So that's a prefab little phrase, right? He didn't come up with that on the fly. That was a line he had coming in to this, knowing he would be asked about this, and that's the same line that Vedant Patel, who's the deputy spokesman for the State Department, he trotted that one out a couple hours ago. He said, oh, you should take it with a big shaker of salt, right? Not a grain of salt, a shaker of salt.
They say something similar to this, to the Nord Stream pipeline explosion,
right?
Too. Like,
yeah,
go ahead.
it's this kind of they have these weird phrases that kind of stick in your mind that clearly were come up with in advance, and they all sort of start recycling these same lines, and it's kind of like, okay, well, I would take what from. Let's say, so what are they actually supposing that, right? Here's a natural follow-up, which I would ask them if I were allowed to be in the same building as them, right? Which a journalist who does their job correctly would ask him as a sort of a follow-up is like, well, so what are you proposing? That the Russians did it to themselves? That it's like a Russian false flag attack? That the Russians wanted to like look weak in front of the world and like, I don't.
That's
what
some in corporate media are saying. Actually, that's what some.
Right.
I think on CNN earlier they were kind of alluding to that. When I posted that, about this stream, Wyatt, and people's reply, I had a bunch of neoliberal people come in and say false flag, false flag, false flag, and post some supposed corporate article.
Well, if you'll remember, a few years ago, the Venezuelan quote-unquote democratic opposition attempted to assassinate Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro the same way with a drone attack. And that was kind of the line at the time from the neolibs was like, oh, he did it himself. Just to, he probably, it was all faked or whatever. Yeah. No, it wasn't. And years later, the so-called intelligence community acknowledged this, that it was a legitimate attempt on his life that was directed from Colombia. But at the time, it was the same thing. It was, oh, he's probably just doing it to himself for attention or whatever.
Again.
Right? Yeah, and it's just,
It's
so
so
this is
ridiculous. That's why I'm laughing. It's so ridiculous to even think that that would be a consideration. But the fact that you would bring up something so ridiculous as a reason is kind of telling to me. You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't have a response like, "Wow, that's something that Ukraine should not engage in that." Like if you didn't have some other response, your response being like that, then it's I don't know.
Well, it's
kind of
just
shaky.
if you really didn't know, why wouldn't you just say that?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you just say we don't
Yeah.
have any way to confirm or deny, so we're not going to say anything until we do?
Point taken. Let's listen a little more and see what Antony Blinken says.
Yeah.
See, we'll see what the facts are, and it's really hard to comment or speculate on this without really knowing.
That said, let me comment and speculate.
Ukraine decided on its own to strike back in Russian territory.
Like he literally pretends like he didn't just say that and asked him a question about
like it was probably Russia, but who am I to speculate?
Let's listen.
And decided on its own to strike back in Russian territory. The United States would not criticize them. Again, these are decisions for Ukraine to make. Seen the reports?
So he asked a question and he doesn't answer because he's saying like, would you be mad at that if that was the case? And he says, and he basically skips over doesn't answer the question there.
Yeah, well, it's a ridiculous premise, the question itself, because he says, he frames it as though would the Ukrainians of their own volition do all these things, and the U.S. didn't know about it. But the reality is that, the U.S. has more or less been using the Ukrainians as kind of like a puppet. It's kind of a meat puppet for them to wear this sort of Ukrainian disguise and go about doing all the anti-Russian warmongering that they've wanted to do for many, many years. And so, now, for him to kind of, to frame this as, if the Ukrainians went out there and did this crazy thing all by themselves. I mean, we know from these so-called Discord leaks that the Ukrainians weren't even allowed to look at the battle plans that the U.S. was drawing up for them until they were ready to put them in motion. So, like, there's like a disconnect here. Right?
Now, so this is, I think you spoke to this earlier, or mentioned this earlier, Speaker of the Dumas, I think that's how you say it. Zelensky's regime is as dangerous, and I guess that's his response to the drone attack on the Kremlin palace. The head of the Russian Dumas,
the Duma, right. Sorry, I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, Russian Duma said on Wednesday that the Ukrainian regime is as dangerous as Al-Qaeda and ISIL, and threatens the security of Russia, Europe, and the whole world. I could be saying that wrong. So my apologies. Right. Those, yeah. I'm building up to get to the article from the Grayzone and Max's Twitter thread. I just wanted to give a little bit of background here. So, a Ukrainian airborne drone stuffed with explosives fell in Moscow region. This was like over a week ago that this was reported. And did you hear about this story at all or no?
Yeah, I mean, we've had similar instances numerous times over the past few months. As I said, it's kind of these have been rising in number and frequency as Ukraine's sort of battlefield prospects collapse. So we've seen more and more of this, and it's kind of, I think that the end game is really they kind of want to goad the Russians into like an overreaction, into some kind of maybe even like a nuclear strike, something like that, right? I think that is kind of the point that they've seen at this point. We're not going to be able to win on the battlefield, so we have to try to make them do something that will change sort of the rules of the game, that will be a game changer for the West in terms of giving us the F-16s we want, the longer range missiles we want.
Right.
So they're trying to create some kind of casus belli, as they say.
Cactus belly. I remember that from Seinfeld. All right, so let me just read. Now, this is a very short little snippet from Al Jazeera. Russia accuses Ukraine of attempt to kill Putin with drones. Officials in Moscow rage again after alleged Ukrainian attack on the Kremlin, but Kyiv denies responsibility. And then it just kind of gives a little bit of the details that they know of, and it says Russia has accused Ukraine of attempting an overnight drone attack on the Kremlin with the aim of killing President Vladimir Putin. The most dramatic charge Moscow has leveled against Kiev since the war on its neighbor began. The allegation was made on Wednesday by the Russian government and reported by several state news agencies. Putin was not in the building at the time, and there was no material damage to the Kremlin, Russian officials said, as they warned of their right to retaliate. To your point, you said you feel like just the history speaks to that this will be likely some sort of retaliation that's going to be coming here. So. Amazing.
Right. Well, I think the Russians probably want to send a message that this is unacceptable, and they presumably want to degrade whatever Ukrainian military capacity allowed them to carry out this strike in the first place. But they probably don't want to do something so brash or just over the top that it serves as a justification for renewed Western arms shipments to Ukraine. So that's kind of been the calculus, I think, for a while now. But as Ukraine gets increasingly desperate, it'll be interesting to see just how the world responds to it, how Russia responds to it. It's a very shocking and pretty interesting turn of events.
I absolutely agree, and I brought this up just to show the sort of the title first, and then we'll go through Max's thread. But this is from the Grayzone, and this is the related story, because I think a day or two before this drone attack, a Ukrainian banker offers cash for drone terror in Russia. Now, this article came out yesterday. Let's read days. Actually, let me shout out the writer, and it's Alexander Rubinstein. Days before a failed drone assassination targeting Putin, Ukrainian banking baron Vladimir Yatsenko, I think that's Yatsenko, offered a $500,000 bounty to any weapons maker able to land a drone in Red Square during Moscow's upcoming Victory Day parade. I'll stop there. Had you heard about this? Well, I know you had, but what was your reaction to hearing about this separately from, I guess, the assassination attempt? Because I think this happened first, and then the other thing happened. Yeah.
So I believe this happened. Yeah, the
on the 23rd.
Yeah, the offer. I'm not sure which date it was. I believe that was in mid-May in terms of, or mid-April in terms of when this Ukrainian oligarch made this offer. Said, on this TV show that I will put up $500,000 to anybody who lands a drone in Red Square. So this article came out yesterday, but it was already talking about attempted drone strikes in Russia. This one obviously didn't make it anywhere. The one reference in this article didn't make it anywhere near Red Square, whereas the one late last night, early this morning, obviously made it just a few hundred feet from the building itself, maybe even less. So certainly an alarming statement, certainly one that calls into question the official denial from the Ukrainians, who say that they who haven't said that they were behind this. They won't take credit for it. That's kind of been their MO when they're carrying out terrorist attacks in other countries. They, didn't confirm or, whatever. They did that kind of we don't confirm or deny kind of
I did one of
trick.
those.
Yeah,
we cannot confirm or deny.
They learn from the best, right? They learn from Langley, for
it's
sure.
so cartoonish. It's so like what we see in Hollywood that it is. So it's actually what it is.
Well,
so this is the actual. Go ahead.
If they were going to deny it, they would deny it.
Right. That's the point. Now here is the Ukrainian banker that they're talking about. This is the actual video, and let me read it again. It says Ukrainian banker offers cash for drone terror in Russia, and he's an oligarch, Vladimir. And we read it before. I don't need to reread it, but let's listen in his own words. And now I'll translate it because it's in he's speaking in Russian, so I'll translate it as quickly as I can. It says, but about how the domestic drone market is developing when all of the Ukrainian Defense Forces needs are met, how will Ukrainian developers take on the international UAV market? And will Ukrainian drones fly to Red Square? Question mark. Let's talk about this with our next guest, Vladimir Y. I'll just say that.
Yatsenko, I think.
Yatsenko. So that's the gentleman on the right, and the one who was first pictured by himself. I guess that's the host of the show.
I can't. So, this outfit he's got on is something else.
What is that? I wonder if it's a lot of money. Is that like something to show that he has a lot of money?
So that's,
or have you ever even heard of this person? Have you heard of this oligarch? That's how they describe him in the article, or that's how Grayzone described him.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with this guy, but what he's wearing is called a vyshyvanka. It's kind of this Ukrainian traditional dress, but it's camo colored, right? He's wearing like camo colored traditional dress, which is just, it's just a bizarre, like it kind of it's a little portal into like his mind, right? Just like I'm gonna go be like the warmongering Ukrainian on TV. I got my perfect outfit. Yeah.
All right, so he is the co-founder of the Monobank and producer of Debunking Drone. I guess he's the maker of it. Is that what that's saying? Vladimir, welcome. We're happy to see you. Let's start with the last one. Let's keep the intrigue. Do you think the Ukrainians will fly to Moscow? And that's the question to him. I think it is a necessary moment. So let me pause here. So this is to your point. It's like for him to say it's a necessary, it's like they're not winning on the battlefield. There's no chance of that. So it's a necessary move to kind of sort of escalate or sort of have some sort of different sort of strategy. And maybe that's the push for this. And to your point, how you were saying, because they weren't winning on the battlefield, this is kind of another way for them to sort of land attacks on Russia. So, yeah.
Right.
All right. So let's
see what else he says here.
Yeah.
I think that is a necessary moment.
I think it's a necessary moment. That is, I think that May 9th is a very good moment. And then they zoom into him as if they know he's about to say some crazy
That's a drop.
Because I read that Putin is planning a parade on Red Square. And that there will be a lot of vehicles. That is, there will be, as they say, very legitimate military targets. And I think that the whole community making drones, so maybe he's a drone producer. He's saying the whole community making drones. We should really make a holiday for them. And I hear that Putin isn't sure whether he will attend. So we must somehow remind him of us. Bless you.
Thanks.
I decided to give this award to Ukrainian manufacturers. The premium is very large, and I believe it should be spent on improvements of drones. Waiting for it to update.
Yeah.
The prize will be 20 million. That's $550,000, $500,000.
Right.
Wow, 20 million with the condition the drone must land on May 9th on Red Square.
Jesus.
The drone should be recognized. That is, it must have the Ukrainian slogan like "Glory to Ukraine" or "Putin, ha ha ha," or "La la la." Maybe that's laughing. Or "Glory to the hero," so that I can clearly understand which manufacturer made it and who did it and who didn't arrive. This money is the minimum amount I will always have deposited in the Mono Bank. You can go to the QR code and see there's already 20 million for participation in the parade. Wow. 20 million Hervinius for participation. I want to say that in order not to give impression that this is a game with Devo's participation, according to the law, I will not pay the prize to myself. So he can't do it.
He's like a sweepstakes promoter, like reading out all those fine print.
By the way, I want to say we are already warming up. For example, on the 28th of March, there was news that there was a drone, and he brings up, I guess, receipts. He holds up.
Yeah.
All right, we're coming to the end here on this video.
He's pointing out a thing that says "Slava Ukraini." That's like the fascist slogan. Like "Glory to the heroes" and the Slava, "Glory to Ukraine," "Glory to the heroes." It's like Nazi slogans, Nazi collaborator slogans.
Unfortunately for us, it was training drones, but it caught on a high voltage line, and he looks giddy in his face. Almost.
He's so thrilled.
Yeah. Let's see what else he says here. But we didn't make it. Only 45 kilometers from Red Square. That's what you were referring to earlier. 45 kilometers away is where he got it. It was, by the way, ready for the parade. We watched a bit how they react, whether or not they see us. I can say that everything will be fine. Let's create a holiday for them. And he says it
laughing.
Quotes. Just amazing what's happening here in this. Now let's go to the thread and kind of sum it up. And this is we said Alexander Rosenstein. That was him in his article. Again, that's the
Rubenstein.
Rubenstein, I'm sorry.
No worries. Rubenstein. I gotta say, if he hears me saying it wrong, he'll get mad.
Rubenstein. So let's say it the right way. I don't want to get you in trouble. Here's Max Blumenthal, just kind of talking about the same subject, his reporting on it, or at least him talking about it through this tweet. This was earlier today. Okay, so earlier today, he quote tweeted the video we just watched, and he says the Kiev regime is denying responsibility for the attempted drone attack on the Kremlin, an attempt to assassinate Putin, which would bring on, I added the on, World War III, ever close. But as we reported, regime-tied forces have been incentivizing precisely this kind of operation, and that's what we just went over. So Max is sort of labeling this guy regime-tied forces have been incentivizing precisely this. Now, I'm not saying the company But that's what Max is pointing out, that they're incentivizing this type of behavior
Right.
on TV, and we just played it. Wow. There's one more thread I want to catch here and get your reaction before we kind of close out here. Let's just read what another writer of the Grayzone says about this. Finance mogul Vladimir Yazinsko allegedly embezzled billions of dollars, average Ukrainian, stored in his bank to oligarch Igor
Kolomoisky.
the main patron of the neo-Nazi Azov battalion and Zelenskyy. Wow.
Yeah.
Just to add another layer to
Right.
this, Wyatt. But can you speak on it? So do you know about what they're speaking about this embezzlement? Have you heard about this in this this particular oligarch, Igor?
Yeah, my understanding is that this has to do with his former position on Privat Bank, which is a big Ukrainian bank that was sort of that was created after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and after it was nationalized in 2016, or it was nationalized in 2016 after $5.5 billion, as the Grayzone reports, mysteriously disappeared from its coffers. So there was another investment banker that accused this guy Yatsenko of stealing the money. He said that Yatsenko was, quote, very important in matters related to the nationalization of Privat Bank, as he headed the direction of corporate lending. Kolomoisky, obviously a long-time sort of funder of various Ukrainian causes, the Azov battalion high among them. Other neo-Nazi formations like Right Sector, Adar, have reportedly also been funded by him, made all the more interesting by the fact that he himself is also Jewish, like Zelenskyy.
Wow.
These are the guys that they point to. Well, hey, would a Jewish guy be funding all these Nazis? Like, well, if he deemed it Jews,
they are like what I would call a coon. If a black person was doing this, I would call them a coon. Wow, so they're over here cooning over here. I don't know what the word would be for a Jewish person. I don't know what the Jewish person. Yeah, I know I can say it, but I'm saying I don't know what the word would be for a Jewish person, and I guess I need to look that up. But whatever that word is, if there's a Jewish person here who knows what that word is, I'll put it up on the screen in the chat. But that is very interesting that they're playing into that, and they're selling out, like they're selling their ethnicity or religion. I don't know if which one they view it as. They're selling that as why would I do that? And look at me, you know what I mean? It's the same thing that would happen here. Amazing.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to think of a.
I can't think of a word. Let me see if the
Uncle
chat
Torah,
has,
maybe, I don't know.
Let me see if the chat has given any. No, I don't see anything in the chat. We'll see. Yeah. Oh wait, here it goes. It says the Jewish community's word is
right.
Okay, so I don't want to say it just in case it's offensive.
Capo.
Maybe
no.
Okay.
It's not. Okay. I can say it. It's the word that he's right. The word that for Jewish concentration camp guards. It's
Oh, that would make sense. Just like it would be like a guard on a plantation, like a black, like an enslaved African. Wow, wow. So full circle. See how we all have these traders, and everybody has a different word for it. But that's why I love learning. I love learning this. So capo. Okay. Wow, amazing. So, but let's go to the writer of the article on the Grayzone and listen to what he tweeted out, Wyatt. And he says, Ukraine is badly losing, so it is resorting to CIA-style covert sabotage operation and Al-Qaeda-style terrorist attacks, car bombs, C4 strapped drones, suicide bombings of infrastructure, remote detonations at public events. Expect to see even more when the offensive flounders. Wow. So Rubenstein, right? Stein. Rubenstein. I don't know. When I see it, I try to not see the word. Because if I see it, I pronounce it the way we say it in California. I would say it over here.
No worries.
So yeah. But what had you seen this tweet before then? And if you had, but what is your reaction to how he describes it? It's kind of how you described it earlier. But what is your reaction to how he described it as a CIA style covert sabotage operation? You mean the CIA does stuff like this? Wyatt, go ahead.
So not only does the CIA do stuff like this, I'm trying to pull up a link to send it to you here.
Okay.
The CIA has a covert, they called it a freedom fighters manual, that they distributed, airdropped over Nicaragua during the 1980s. I'll send you a DM here.
Okay.
And if
I'm,
you
did it.
Oh, I gotta move my camera because I had it on the on
No
the laptop
worries.
there.
No worries.
Yeah. So this fascinating manual here gives you kind of a little bit of insight into what the kind of mentality at the CIA is, and it's confirmed obviously by Operation Timber Sycamore, by all their dirty war tactics in Syria as well, that this is something they do to this day. But in this particular manual shows people how to basically go around sabotaging a society and also creating things like IEDs to blow up buses. So, there are a lot of, and it's really kind of a trip, and I encourage viewers to check it out and to kind of
I'll put the link in the description box. Sorry, Wyatt, for cutting you off. I'll put the link link to this website in the description box. Give me like a couple minutes to put it there, guys. But continue, Wyatt.
Well, so as you can see here in the Wikipedia page on it, which I'm sure they do their best to downplay the significance of this in the article, but drawing from the specific quote here, the CIA said it was a practical guide to liberating Nicaragua from oppression and misery by paralyzing the military-industrial complex of the traitorous Marxist state. So that's a little bit of CIA magic for you, rhetorical magic.
Wow.
They really, they have no allegiance to any particular, they'll say anything, right? They'll adopt any kind of language and use it on any type of people if they think it'll play. They're using the term military industrial complex to refer to Nicaragua, right? They're almost like this is like the second or third poorest country in the hemisphere. They barely have an industrial complex at all, let alone a military industrial complex. You know what I mean? Can you imagine like they're out there exporting weapons all over the world? No, you know what I mean? But it doesn't really matter. It's just, they're using just some juicy words that's going to grab you. Like, oh, sure, they're military industrial complex,
That sounds
Everyone's
about
got
right.
one of those, right? We definitely have one, so they probably do too. But this was, going back to the point, this has always been, I don't know, always, but for at least 40 years, this has been kind of the modus operandi of the CIA. It's like, hey, we want to have a war without having to be directly publicly involved. Well, here are our little rules, here are our little guidebooks, here are our tactics. Here's the little booklets that we airdrop over countries to tell people how to, push our regime change operation from within. So now, they're doing the same thing in Russia. For many years, the value of Ukraine, especially post-World War II, to the kind of transatlantic elites, sort of capitalist ruling class in the West, was basically like, hey, this is a perfect staging ground for our counterinsurgency efforts, or our insurgency efforts against the Soviet Union, A, because it's right on the border between Europe and Russia, B, because it's filled with a bunch of nationalists who vehemently hate Russia and who were Nazi collaborators in World War II, and who better, this is the idea of the CIA for many years, who better to take down the communists than the number one most committed anti-communists, which are the fascists, which are the Nazis. You know, they were the most diehard, dependable anti-communist assets the CIA ever had. And there are plenty of comments to that effect from former CIA officials.
Maybe that's why they're so fine with funding Nazi. Maybe that's the reason why they're so fine with doing it. But go ahead, to your point.
There's a long historical precedent of them doing exactly that. Funding and well, Stepan Bandera was more of an MI5 project, but his right-hand man, a guy named Mykola Lebed, who was responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of Jews and Poles, basically more or less personally oversaw it. He was subsequently managed to escape justice, escape the Soviets who wanted to execute him, understandably, for his crimes. And he made it with the help of the CIA, and he lived out his life working as a CIA asset from Pittsburgh, where he died in 1989 after a long and lovely life. But this is a guy who is directly responsible for the deaths of thousands, right, of people. And that was, he was just, well, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. That was the attitude.
That's the attitude. And the eggs just happen to be people's lives. That's all. The eggshells just happen to be lives being crushed.
Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people's lives, millions of people's lives who've been totally uprooted by this conflict. And that is the classic tactic was, hey, we're going to ship all these Ukrainian insurgents. They were airdropping them in. And then because they didn't realize they had a mole for many years, they were all immediately getting scooped up by the KGB. And they had waiting parties for them every time they came. Thank you. I think Kim Philby probably responsible for that one. Former MI5 spy who was actually secretly working for the Soviets for many decades.
There's just so much.
I'm sorry, I'm like getting off track here, but
no. I don't mean that. I mean one spy is a double agent and a triple agent and all this other shit.
You never know, man. You really
TV.
Right. But so that.
But
was
it's funny how Hollywood
conceptualization of Ukraine, right? That was how they thought of Ukraine. Is like, this is our backdoor straight into the Soviets. Right. This is our most direct sort of point of entry. And the Soviet Union has always understood, the Russians have always understood that Ukraine is the West's number one access point to Russia. It's how Napoleon invaded. It's how Hitler invaded, through Ukraine. So it's always been a very sore spot. And, people on TV who, work for the CIA or the State Department pretend not to know better. They pretend that, this was unprovoked and they just hate Ukraine because, they hate freedom and democracy. They hate the perfect democracy that is Ukraine. No, they have very legitimate reasons for being hesitant about having Western domination of Ukraine, because the last few times it's happened, it's led to ruin for their country's millions of deaths.
Do you think this alleged, and I'm just going to say that for the sake of the show, but alleged, but this drone attack or this failed drone attack, do you think it seals the deal? And I know you said somebody in the Russian government had alluded to this, seals the deal that Zelensky is not going to be in power at all with any sort of peace that will be done. Like Zelensky, he's done. Like, he's done. At first they were okay, but he's done. Is that your assessment? Are you there, Wyatt? Is he frozen? I think Wyatt's frozen. Yeah, Wyatt's frozen. All right, so let's listen to Zelensky. This is Zelensky. Are you frozen? It looks so clear. All right, so yeah, he's frozen. So when he gets back, I'll put him back in. But let's listen to Zelensky, and this will be kind of to close out the segment to hear. Well, we're listen to what he says, and then of course I'll have to read it because it's in Russian. Actually, no, he's speaking in English. Let's listen to Zelensky.
We don't attack Putin or Moscow. We fight on our territory. We are defending our villages and cities. We don't have, enough weapon for this. That's why we don't use it anywhere. For us, that is the deficit. We can't spend it. And we didn't attack Putin. We leave it to tribunal. We don't attack Putin or Moscow. We fight on our territory. We are defending our villages and cities.
So he was. I mean, if I'm hearing, because I'm letting it play again, because I want to make sure I'm hearing what he's saying about, like, basically they don't have enough ammunition or they don't have enough equipment to do this type of thing. Let's listen.
Cities. We don't have, enough weapon for this. That's why we don't use it.
Yeah, that is exactly what he's saying. Is that they don't have enough weapons to even do this sort of attack.
Anywhere. For us, that is the deficit. We can't spend it. And we didn't attack Putin. We leave it to tribunal. We
leave it to tribunal. So, and I don't know if Wyatt is back. Oh, there you go. So yeah, give me the thumbs up whenever you're ready, and I'll replay this. But this is like I was saying, this is Zelensky pretty much saying, like, it wasn't him, or it wasn't Ukraine, and that they don't have enough weaponry to pull off attacks like this. Maybe this is the reason why it has to be incentivized for other people to get into the game and get these drones going, because of what's happening on the battlefield with Russia that we were just talking about. So I'm gonna play it one more time so that I can make sure Wyatt hears it before we add him back into the stream. So actually he's ready, so I'll add him now. So Wyatt, let me let you listen to this last part. This is kind of to sum up this this segment here. This is Zelensky. I think he's in Finland. The latest NATO member. He's in Finland right now. And he was asked about it. So let's listen to what he says about the Kremlin drone attack.
We don't attack Putin or Moscow. We fight on our territory. We are defending our villages and cities. We don't have, enough weapon for this. That's why we don't use it anywhere. For us, that is the.
He's essentially why it's saying we don't have enough weapons, so we can't use it like willy-nilly. Like, we don't have enough weapons to just be, doing these types of things. But to the point that I was making, this could be precisely the reason that the guy went on TV to incentivize other actors to participate, and sort of the drone makers specifically to participate. But what say you about that particular point and what Zelensky is saying here? And then I'll finish the video after.
Well, I'm convinced, right? Are you not convinced as well?
That was that's all it took.
He put all his heart and soul into that one. We don't do this, okay? Right? Promise. No, I mean, it's all about plausible deniability. That's kind of the name of the game here. Is just give the West, give the media a soundbite that they can use to, okay, well, Zelensky says he didn't do it, So it's probably just the crazy Russians making it up. You have to take everything they say with a shaker of salt, right? Blinken said that, so it's got to be true.
Does a shaker mean like it's so outrageous? Instead of saying a grain of salt, when you say shaker, it means
it's like a new phrase that they're coming up with, because you would say a grain of salt, right? But a grain isn't enough. You need the whole salt shaker, right? It's like this melodramatic little phrase.
Oh Lord.
Yeah.
All right.
So to me, he's basically I think you're right, nail on the head there. He's saying, well, this wasn't an official Ukrainian action. Maybe it was some private citizen, some private enterprising Ukrainian, or perhaps some angry Russian who just took it on himself one day to, try to take out the president of the Russian Federation. It's absurd. Private citizens generally do not have access to the kind of technology that you need to land a weaponized bomb-carrying drone into the center of the most protected square mile anywhere in Russia, right? Yeah, it's just, obviously, it's too soon to say exactly what happened here, but I'm inclined towards what you're saying here, that this is kind of a plausible deniability thing, that that's some entrepreneur out there who's just trying to win a prize, hit the president, win a prize.
For all we know, maybe that was part of the whole plan, to have it come out so it makes it seem like it's not the government that's doing it. So for all we know, it could have been, not to say that's what it is, but we don't know. And
the reality is,
go ahead.
Ukraine is not like a free society. You can't just run around launching military attacks willy-nilly. You would be in trouble. You get in trouble for taking videos of drone strikes, right? You get in trouble for taking videos of like a smoke in the distance. They send the SBU, they send the secret police to your door to do God knows what, so people aren't just
you call them the secret police.
Well,
are they secret and then they have a regular police, or that's just the name of their police?
That is they are like a modern day descendant of kind of the KGB, right? And that is I don't think they would call themselves secret police, but they're like an FBI that you can't that all wears masks. You know what I mean? That all wears masks all the time, and you never really know who they are or what. You know what I mean? So it's a secret,
very secret. When they're labeled secret because of the mask, because nobody knows who they are publicly. Is that the reason why they're kind of given that, or is it because how they operate? Like,
then they take people they accuse of collaborating with Russia. They take them and hide them in black sites, a technique I'm sure they picked up from some of their buddies over in Langley over here. But there have been hundreds, at least, probably thousands of people who have just been disappeared by them. They just get taken, tortured, and their bodies disposed of. This was a big problem after 2014 in the East, is basically anybody who got ratted out by their neighbor, or just people who got like somebody would accuse them of like watching Russian TV or something, and people would get picked up left and right by the SBU guys. So, why exactly people call them secret, I guess there's a handful of reasons. But you definitely don't want to interact with them. You want to keep those interactions down to a minimum, unless you're like a sadist or a masochist, I guess.
People are loving, the chat is loving you here on Wednesday. That's why I changed the name there to Wednesdays with Wyatt. That's actually a pretty catchy name. But I think
might have to make it a regular thing.
Yeah, that's where I was getting to. We'll talk about it offline, but I know you do, like, you're a journalist, so things are kind of like not so scheduled sometimes, but absolutely, I would love to have Wednesdays with Wyatt, if we can make it as regular as possible, once a month, once every
Let's
other
do it.
week.
Let's
Once
do
a
it.
week,
We'll-
yeah, something like
we'll-
that. We'll talk offline and get the details worked out. But
For sure.
people love seeing you here on Wednesday.
Awesome.
We'll close out that segment, and we're going to be ending the stream very soon. I just want to play the video. I know you've seen it on or maybe you haven't. This is Medea Benjamin showing up. This is the same conference where we had Antony Blinken speaking, but he's not on the stage at this time. It's just this gentleman. And then
David Ignatius. He's one of the. He's like one of the Washington Post's absolute lowlights. He's
terrible.
If anyone there deserves it, it's him. So he's
a Morning Joe regular. He's a Morning Joe regular. Yes. So let's watch the protest. And this is the Julian Assange protest, I would call it. Oops. Let me turn the sound back up here.
In particular, I'm curious whether you've been able to talk.
Excuse us, we can't use this day without calling for the freedom of Julian Assange. The Biden.
So I had watched it from here, and I didn't know that was Antony Blinken. But now that I have this extra 12 seconds, that is Antony Blinken right there. I watched it from here. Yeah, I watched it from here.
He's just standing there with his like legs crossed and his hands in his lap, like, this is interesting.
All right, so I'll rewind it. So that is Antony Blinken. I said it wasn't earlier, so let's listen.
In particular, I'm curious whether you've been able to talk.
Excuse us, we can't use this day without calling for the freedom of Julian Assange. The Biden.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
there we go.
Oh my God, dude.
Take it easy. Take it easy. Take it easy, guys.
Not one word about journalist Shireen Abu Akleh.
Jesus, they really manhandled her off the stage.
You hear why he had to tell them this can't be the normal thing, guys. Take it easy. Take it easy, guys, because there's cameras around. That's a woman. Right. There's cameras around.
She's like.
Yeah, she's tiny. You're like 6'5". She's like 5'2".
And they need like 4 like jack dudes to like rip her off the stage. It's crazy.
Like Jack, really like you talking about the people that protect an Antony Blinken.
Yeah,
come on.
Like like they treated her like she was like going for his throat or something, instead of just like standing there with a sign. But no, I mean it's an obvious point. And it's another year that goes by with Reporters Without Borders, making really any real stink at all about Julian Assange's ongoing detention. He spent over a decade basically now sequestered off from humanity. The past couple of years, he's been locked up in Britain's maximum security, the Guantanamo of the UK is what they call it, the Belmarsh prison. And he's denied access to pretty much anyone. When he did have access at the embassy, at the Ecuadorian embassy, every one of his visitors was having their phones scanned and copied. They were being, so I mean,
monitored.
Right. Literally, and it's high profile people too, like Pamela Anderson and stuff. They're going after anybody. They considered murdering this man. They plotted to murder him under Mike Pompeo. And so, for them to have another World Press Freedom event and Julian Assange isn't front and center, that shows you pretty much everything you need to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. And I think that's another reason why he had to say kind of chill. Because Julian Assange, you see a lot of the corporate newspapers now giving the okay to say, yeah, let's free Julian Assange. It's wrong. They're giving the okay to say that now, because this was never about, and I think it was Chuck Modi who said it on here. This was never really about bringing him here to get him on trial, because then you have things like discovery, and it could be other things that can come out about the government with a trial like that, depending on how they try him, because government has different ways. So this is all about torturing him publicly, saying if you do this to the U.S. empire, this is the treatment you're getting. But it is absurd, and I'll pass it to you after this. It is absurd, Wyatt, that this says 2023 World Press Freedom Index, and then Julian Assange is not front and center at this event. But
yeah, well, it's the Reporters Without Borders, the Committee to Protect Journalists, all of these supposed kind of media watchdogs or press freedom watchdogs. I mean, at this point, they're just extensions of the broader media apparatus themselves. All these people, they are the same kind of journalist class of people that considers themselves to have like a God-given right to be able to go out anywhere in the world and tell a given people or a given country what they're doing wrong, and they're allowed to say anything or do anything, and they just think that they should basically not have any consequences ever. You see this at like Evan Gershkovich thing where it's like, this guy is a long time massive, you know what I mean, like Putin hater who spent the last decade like open, you know what I mean, really trying to bring about the fall of the government. And that's always who they end up propping up at these events, are these kind of like propagandists, these Western propagandists who get caught up in some kind of espionage stuff. That's who they're mainly concerned with. They're not concerned with Julian Assange, because to them he's not a real journalist, because he doesn't float his like theories past the CIA before publishing them. He doesn't you know what I mean? He doesn't get a pat on the head and the AOK from the big guys.
But it's interesting. Why would Secretary Blinken be at a press freedom event in the first place? Why? Like, I don't get
it's the Gershkovich stuff. It's the Evan Gershkovich stuff, right? They're trying to set up, and it bleeds into this kind of whole Biden administration thing where they say, we are the defenders of democracy. Those are the autocrats. Those are the autocracies. It's not good versus evil. It's democracy versus autocracy. That's how they want to portray their new fight to preserve what they call the international liberal rules-based order, right? We're defending our rules-based order from the evil autocrats. So they've honed in on press freedom as like some little area where they can say, oh, well, we're bad, but we're not as bad as those guys, right? Oh, that here's finally some area we've been able to identify where we can look like we have the moral high ground over Russia.
At least that's what they think. At least that's what they think.
Right. That's what they think. Well, and in their defense, everyone lets them get away with it, just about.
Right.
So
except for Khashoggi, I guess, except for Julian Assange, except for, there's so many things we can point out that they're hypocrites on. But I guess they're trying to mesh it together. But it also proves to me, and we can close with this point, it also proves to me how the press knows they're being used by the state. Like, it proves that it's not like, oh, we're being duped. No, they understand that they're being used by the state to coerce people for the ruling class's purposes, and that's the reason why they're not as trusted as before. But people like yourself, Wyatt, is so. But thank you for joining us this is our first Wyatt. Wednesdays with Wyatt, and we'll let you know for future times we're able to match up to do something like this. But Wyatt, let everybody know if there's anything coming up for you, any projects you're working on, like any big stories you're working on that you can talk about. I know if you can't talk about it, of course. Anything else that you want to shout out where people can find you before we close out here?
Nothing coming to mind in terms of something I really, really want to hype, but I'm always coming out with new thoughts, new articles. I am on Twitter. You can find me now. I'm now searchable. I've been unshadow banned, I think. Unsearch banned. So at Wyatt Reed 13. I'm on Telegram as well. You can find me on Substack too. And if you're not in Europe, you can access all my articles on Sputnik.com or SputnikNews.com. And, I have a profile there as well. So plenty of places to check me out. Depending on where you are, you may not be allowed to do so. But
Oh
if you live
yeah,
in
because
a
Sputnik is blocked in certain countries or something
blocked
like
in
that.
the whole European Union, you can't. You have to use a VPN. That's for your protection.
That's our protection, everybody.
You don't need to do any unauthorized thinking.
That's a good way of putting it. All right, so Wyatt, I want to thank you again, sir, for joining me for this very interesting conversations. I try to keep Wednesdays foreign policy, but if we start doing this Wyatt Wednesdays with Wyatt, we'll leave it open. We'll probably mostly do foreign policy because that's just like what we like to do. But maybe sometimes we'll do some domestic stuff. But Wyatt and I will let you know what we're gonna be doing. Wyatt, I'll put you in the back. Where are we here? And thank you again, Wyatt, for joining. And we'll let everybody know what we're gonna be doing in the future. What I want to do here, I'm going to take this down. Couple of things we need to show I thought was interesting before I close out here. First thing I want to shout out is there is a Long Beach chapter of RBN, and there's a Twitter account that you can subscribe to or follow, and you'll get updates. What I'm going to try to do is make the Twitter and there's a YouTube page too, channel that is for the Long Beach chapter of RBN. I'm going to try to make it to where we give local people the opportunity to do content about local stuff. So I'll go out in Long Beach and Compton and see if I can find some people willing to do some podcasts on some of the work they're doing, and maybe have that as shows on the Long Beach RBN channel on YouTube. But check it out on Twitter and YouTube. Just wanted to shout that out. The other thing is Long Beach chapter. Also, if you're interested, email us, and in the subject line, put Long Beach chapter. Here's the email address, info@revblacknetwork.com. We got a couple of people already emailed about different chapters we're in correspondence with. So we're still collecting names. So if you're emailed us, we're going to send you some questions to answer. And then we're going to just collect in everybody's answer, and then we'll move on from there. So shout that out. I just wanted to shout that out. All right. The other thing. So I'm loving the collabs we're doing. I love this new thing. I'm going to try to set up with Wyatt Wednesdays with Wyatt. And then, of course, you're going to have Nick at Night tonight on Wednesdays. And then also, if you didn't get a chance to check it out, we have the Post-Duopoly show. The Post-Duopoly show. That there's no specific day on that, but we will be doing that again with Due Dissidence and Heartlands Media. I think next week we're going to try to set some up, if not this weekend. All right, everybody. I think that is it. Make sure you hit that like button. We got 350 people watching, so another 50 people can hit that like button because I think we're at 300 likes right now. So I think that is it. I'll go ahead and play an outro video for you as we go through some of your final comments. So I'll throw up some of your final comments as we play this outro video. Oops. I need to go here first to media. I don't know what's here for me to play, but hey, let's do it. Oh, look at this graphic that she made for today's event, for today's flyer. Look. Pretty cool, huh? Take myself off the screen, see how good it looks. Pretty cool. So that was done by our editor. Oh, that was this animated graphic for today's show was done by our editor. Just one of the many things she does. And while we have this fundraiser scrolling at the bottom, this is the graphic to our fundraiser. RBN fundraiser, RBN Labor and Bills fundraiser, our Cash App. We have a Cash App, Mutual Aid Forever. You can donate. We have a Venmo, Revolutionary Blackout is the username. And then we also have a GoFundMe that is scrolling there at the bottom. Or if you go, no, scrolling there at the bottom. Yeah, just scrolling there at the bottom. The other thing I was going to say, don't forget to check out our website. And don't forget to get on our Substack. And here is our website address, revolutionaryblackoutnetwork.com. And here's our Substack. Want to know when we go live? When Nick is going to be going live tonight, join our Substack. We send out one email a day that has all of our clips. So instead of we do 5 clips, instead of getting 5 different emails, you get one email with 5 clips. And then, of course, whatever email for any live shows that day. So join our Substack if you want to get any of those notifications. And now we'll go ahead and exit this stream. Thank you for everybody watching. I will toss up your comments as we play this outro video once I find it here. Where is it? Man. Oh, here's some of the graphics. This is good to go through some of the graphics. I told you about our fundraiser, our labor fundraiser. Here are the graphics that has been made by Aaron. Here we go. There's one of them. It's a funny one. Hard pass. That's another one. So she's doing some great graphics. Heartbreaking breakpoints. That clip is at 6,000 views. I don't know what is said in that clip, but that clip has got a good amount of views. But so yeah, let's now zero in on the outro video, which I believe is coming up. These are all the graphics. Wow, she has a lot of graphics. Yeah. Maybe there isn't a video here. Oh, I think I'm in the wrong place that I was looking for. I'm supposed to be in the replies. Sorry. There's a little bit of scrolling, but it's not as much. Actually, let's end with this video right here. As now, we don't want to get copyright, so you can see and watch this video on our page with the full sound, but I'm playing it without sound so that we don't get a copyright on this video. So here we go.
Kids, stop having so much